Rep, do you have more committee meetings this week, or did you get everything done yesterday?
I have a property tax subcommittee tomorrow.
I'm not tracking those. Are they occupying a lot of your spare time? I use air quotes around that spare time comment.
It's a common topic of discussion and of interest with a lot of folks. And the meeting tomorrow is 5 hours. So,
yeah. Ouch. You think it's gonna? It's a joint committee, right?
No.
Okay, just how? Okay.
Yeah, the Senate's not yet taken action on anything relative to property taxes. So it's it's the presentation of the 8 different filed HARs or bills.
All right, I see the numbers jumping up now, and it is 12 o'clock. I want to be respectful of your time, Representative. So let's go ahead and kick this off. So welcome to the 6th and potentially final webinar in our series on the new stormwater rule. The title for this webinar is Equipped for the Stormwater Rule, a Legislator's Perspective. And I'm very excited to have Representative Bill Connerly with us today. Before I introduce him, I'd just like to quickly recap the goal of the series, which is hosted by the ACEC Florida Water Resources Committee and the Florida Engineering Society's Environmental Committee. And our goal is to equip stormwater professionals to navigate and implement the new stormwater rule. As I mentioned, this is our 6th in the series, and we started, I guess back in the spring with a discussion with Borja Crane-Amores from DEP, where we started with a little bit about the policy formulation of the new rule. We met with David Miracle out of St. John's River Water Management District to get a permitter's perspective. We met with Jennifer Johnson from DOT as a big user of ERP stormwater rules and to get her experience and perspective. Modeling and design presentation from Mark Thomason, which we really appreciated. And our last presentation was with Ralph Ferrer, a professional landscape architect, on the integrated green infrastructure provisions of the new rule. I did put a chat link in the chat to the where you can access any of the prior webinars, and this webinar will also be recorded and available in the chat either late this week or early next week. A little bit of housekeeping: please stay on mute so we keep the noise down, the background noise down, and you are welcome to put questions for the representative in the chat or save them to the end. There will be time for Q&A at the end. And again, we're going to have a legislator on the call with us today, Representative Bill Connerly. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Engineering from the University of Florida. He's a veteran of the U.S. Navy, go Navy, beat Army. He is a state representative for District 772, covering portions of Manatee County, and the only licensed professional engineer serving in the Florida legislature. He's a career civil engineer with Kimley Horn, with decades of experience in stormwater design and permitting. But I would say, like many of us, most of those decades were under the pre-2024 rule framework. So probably on the learning curve like a lot of us. Current committee assignments include Natural Resources and Disasters, Transportation and Economic Development Budget Subcommittee. And you can kind of guess from those titles, he's really at the nexus of infrastructure, policy, and resource management. And Rep. Connerly, in his short tenure in the legislature, this will be his second session. He's already become known for bridging his practical design experience with the realities of public policy and governance in Florida, and brings a valuable technical perspective to discussions about all things policy related in the legislature, and today about the rules, stormwater rules, intent, implications, and ongoing evolution. So welcome, Representative Connerly. I realize it's in the middle of a committee week and you're squeezing us in during your lunch break. We really, really appreciate it, sir. Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here, and it's always beneficial when I get to interact with the technical folks, and the opportunity to expand the knowledge base on this rule is extremely important. I think my perspective is unique in the House, and the reality is I don't have time right now with this new venture I took on to get into the weeds, and I'm hoping that all of the partners, FES and ACEC partners, will help educate me on the implementation of the rule.
Well, I suspect you're probably going to hear some comments along those lines from the people on the call today. This is the kind of the joint ACEC and Water Resources, committees here. We're at 75 people now. Probably will continue to climb, just knowing how notoriously tardy engineers tend to be on big teams calls. But let's just have a conversation about some things that I know are important to you. I've heard you speak many times in front of different groups. This is the group of your peers. I guess I'll ask you a pretty obvious question. How has it been so far? You're the only P in the Florida House. Do they make engineer jokes? And then, how has your background as an engineer shaped your view on policy formulation? And can you just opine a little bit about the role of engineers in the legislature? Why are you the only one? Shouldn't there be more of us up there?
First, with that last question, absolutely. I think the difficulty is that engineers tend to deal with fact, and they don't allow emotional decisions to get in the way, and that doesn't always work well with politics. So that might be the reason. I might have a personality defect where it's something that I actually enjoy, is the challenge and the opportunity to work to solve these issues that aren't always technical issues. Sometimes they're social issues, or just provide benefit for others of the state. You mentioned engineer jokes. Are there any engineer jokes? How I the only engineer
jokes.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That the only engineering joke I know is why did the engineer cross the road?
I think I know the answer.
Yeah, that's what he did on his last project. So
that's right. Fantastic.
But yeah. But the reality is that having a technical background and bringing an analytical mind to the legislative process has been very helpful for me. The reality is that consulting as an engineer is very similar to being a legislator. People bring you problems, and the compulsion to try to solve those problems, it still exists. So you hear their problems and you want to do a deep dive, and the difficulty is there are so many different problems and rabbit holes to go down. They're not all technical. I tend to gravitate toward the technical issues, and I am getting a bit of a reputation as having an interest in water or infrastructure. And if somebody in leadership has brought a problem, they'll say, oh, that sounds like something Connerly would be interested in. So it does tend to increase the probability that you're going to get something that maybe falls in your wheelhouse. And the fact that I'm the only engineer here is it's very likely it's something that's going to be difficult. I just had a meeting with DEP staff, and we ran through about 6 different issues that I have either I would like to run bills on, or things I'm working on, or need assistance from them. I'm not certain that the average legislator is going to have so much interaction with the department. It's a unique position. The other benefit of being an engineer is when we start talking, you know, as all engineers do, the language we use is very different than what a lot of people have heard. And what I found is I'll start talking and the reaction isn't, oh, I understand. It's more like, oh, he sounds like he knows what he's talking about, so I'll just go along with it. So it's very beneficial. I, I, I'm amongst peers now, and I don't have expertise in a lot of things the other folks might have expertise in. So, but with the legislators, I don't get challenged on issues very frequently. It's very nice, actually. It's like winning an argument all the time. So, but it is an interesting position. And the other thing I've kind of realized is a lot of the stuff I'm working on, it may not provide benefit for the state immediately. It may be something that it may take a decade for full implementation or realization of benefit. So I've started getting involved in things like water resiliency, sourcing of water, nutrient stuff. You and I recently discussed the phosphorus removal criteria that might be necessary for septic on-site wastewater system designs. But I've also started getting more involved in energy, and there's a realization that some of the things that we might need as a state to benefit businesses and residents may be energy driven, and our current focus in the state related to energy is more one of storm restoration or storm hardening. We're not focusing on production of new facilities or transmission or distribution. So, there are things that could happen at the federal level that have an impact with the needs for energy. Like, we met recently, Jeff, and talked about the pre and polyfluoroalkyl chemicals that are in water, and I presume that when they do develop technology that's destructive, where you can actually, instead of just sequestering, where you can just destroy it, it's probably going to be an energy-driven system. And then with the increase in AI and data centers, you're going to need energy. So I don't know that the average legislator is looking that far in the future to the needs of Florida. And I'm hoping, it's a little scary to think of the things we need to put in place, and understanding how hard it is to build something, how hard it is to design something, to actually get something in place that the average person's not focusing on right now. So I feel like I'm one of the it's my opportunity to be one of the guys looking ahead and starting to warn my partners in the legislature of the need of these things in the future for Florida to continue to be vibrant and successful.
I appreciate that perspective very much. So this is a webinar about the new stormwater rules. So we've got to broach that subject, Representative. So
yeah,
from where you're sitting now, you're, I'm sure, acutely aware of the drivers for the rule change. The algae blooms and the kind of the public outcry for more stringent performance standards and a number of types of infrastructure. And stormwater, of course, was one of the key items in that Clean Waterways Act. How can you think about, or maybe share with us how you would weigh those environmental performance standards that that the policymakers have put in place as a result of public outcry, but now we've got we're on the practical design and implementation end of this equation.
Right.
How do you weigh and balance those expectations and share a little bit about your perspective on balancing those competing policy issues, and then knowing that downstream the practical implications when when the rubber meets the road are more burdens for us and for our clients.
Yeah, absolutely. The reality prior to being elected, the only time I'd been to Tallahassee was the year prior when the Senate was considering uh, the resolution related to the implementation of the rules. And I came up, and part of the reasoning was as a user of the rules, the water management district rules, and somebody that designed projects and designed stormwater management systems. It was the question was, do we have enough information to implement the rules? Is there technology that is sufficient to meet the criteria that we're establishing? And the other question I had is the cost to implement. Do we fully understand the impact it may have on things such as housing and roadway projects? That these are some of the questions I had prior to being elected. And the reality is that I was in a position that many of the folks on the call were in, where I'm trying to understand how we're going to take these rules that have not been implemented previously and incorporate them efficiently in a design where we can meet the requirements. And it was a little daunting. The reality is, after being elected, there's a more of a realization of the impact of the nutrient loading on superficial water in the state than the average modeler. I was focusing on my design and wasn't thinking outside the property boundary and trying to get things to work appropriately, get the base flood elevation established with whatever I was doing. So it was not a holistic view of what I was trying to do. The benefit that I focused on previously was related to, technical design. We've always done treatment in stormwater management. You always explain to the fresh new engineer intern that comes in that you do treatment and attenuation. Treatment was always ancillary. That wasn't the main part of the discussion. That was a formula, essentially, that if you did that, you were doing good. The focus was always the attenuation. What the new rule has done is provided a spotlight for attenuation and the environmental impact that human activity has an opportunity to put on nature. And I tend to be skeptical when I hear somebody make a broad statement about something like, for example, red tide. And I live in Manatee County, I work in Sarasota County. The beach is there. They're always concerned about red tide. So I've done research, and one of the things I remember reading is that I can't remember exactly who it was, a Spaniard who came to Florida in the 1500s or 1600s, witnessed red tide in the Gulf. It naturally occurs. So it's like, okay, it's a natural problem. It's not a human created problem, but that negates the realization that could be human influences on it, such as, the topic of this conversation, nutrients. So, we have to understand that just living and working in an area is going to have an impact. And being in the position I'm in now, I'm getting a broader view, or an expanded view of the things that have influence over things we do. Just one of the recent conversations I had with one of the other House members was related to the BMAPs, the Basin Management Action Plans. And she was in an area that included Lake Okeechobee. And, that caused me to open up the BMAP for Lake Okeechobee and start digging in. She had questions. And that's one of the other things, being the engineer in the House it's not just constituents or lobbyists or agencies bringing you problems. Your fellow House members have questions. They're like, oh, let me go ask Bill. He knows about water. So, doing a deep dive and something like that, trying to
Mhm.
educate myself causes me to, I think, come up with ideas for legislation and have a better understanding of why these rules are necessary. So I said previously, I was there to, question, essentially ask the question are these rules, do we have enough information? Do we have enough technology to implement these rules at this time? Now I'm in a position where I understand these requirements are very, very necessary for the benefit of the state, for the ability of the state to continue to draw tourism in and benefit everybody. If you have red tide on a beach, people aren't going to want to, if you have algae blooms, in the St. John's, people aren't going to want to come there and visit. We had, I think it was 143 million visitors in the state of Florida. I think it was in 23 or 24. 23 million people live here, and we had 143 million people coming here, spending their money and providing opportunities for Floridians that you don't get the same benefit in Alabama that you do, even though they're on the water. People come to Florida as a destination, and we need to make sure that one of our most critical assets, which is the environment, is protected, and we do everything we can. Everybody on this call is extremely smart and technical, and it's going to take a lot of creative approaches in order to implement this rule properly. And it's not going to be easy. And there are going to be situations where it's extremely difficult to meet the criteria, but the benefit of it is worth the extra effort to get there.
That's quite a charge, and I appreciate that perspective very much. Do you see any hint that any of these kind of foundational policy positions are cracking, uh, or do you find your peers in lockstep in terms of prioritizing, water quality and smart growth and support for infrastructure? Those are still broad legislative themes.
Uh, I would say currently there is a lot of um, folks moving in the same direction. One of the realizations that I had is that it was also an education that if somebody like the governor, um, if he campaigns on an issue and he prioritizes it, he's very likely to find partners in the legislative process that will implement those priorities. And time and money dedicated to solve a problem are probably going to have a much more successful outcome than something that's not properly funded or the support's not there. So, with Governor DeSantis prioritizing the water quality for the state of Florida, I think has been a mechanism to allow for a lot of the advancements that we have and the rules that we now have in place. That being said, the next governor, whoever it is, if they have a different priority, I can't imagine that they're going to take a different position related to nutrient removal in the state of Florida. That could, if it is by chance a different position, that could have an impact, because I'm sure he'd be able to find legislative partners that might be of the same mindset to change something that
Okay.
the previous governor advanced. But I can't envision that being an outcome that would likely occur. It seems like the general attitude is that the environment is extremely important to Florida for many reasons. It needs to be protected, and we have multiple programs. All the work they're doing in the Everglades is, again, it's the focus is to restore the environment or protect the environment. The different conservation programs to to secure land and maybe agricultural use or natural
Mhm.
habitat. A lot of money is spent in the state of Florida to again maintain the ability to have that natural element. It's one of the things that draws people to the state of Florida. And as a engineer who is, I've done projects that involve development construction where you're taking maybe agricultural land from a green field to a more urbanized use. The understanding that you also have the ability to have a positive impact on the environment, that's viewed as something that would be counter or contrary to environmental preservation. But when you're in a position like I'm in now where you can have impact on the environment, I think it can be done in a more thoughtful way. It's not policy without action. I have gotten involved with a couple different groups, and they're considered environmental groups, but the intent of finding groups that aren't just considering policy, that they want to find action, they're doing shore hardening or restoration. It's a much more impactful. These people are working to provide benefit to the state, and that's what I tend to gravitate towards. So I think that's a long answer to a long question, but
No, I appreciate that. And I've heard versions of what you're describing said by a lot of people. I agree with you that that seems to be the sentiment shared by a lot of folks in Tallahassee about really, I guess maybe you could let me see if you would agree with this statement. This is how I've heard it boil down. We just we can't afford to develop Florida like we've done for the last 40 years for the next 40 years. Like it
yeah,
would be unrecognizable if we don't kind of step
yeah,
up our design game and do smarter development, smarter infrastructure,
yeah.
cleaner infrastructure, and otherwise, we'll all be it'll be a Walmart parking lot in 40 years from now. So we've all heard the call to action from you, and we appreciate that. Any more advice about stormwater professionals? What we should be doing right now to get more engaged or more equipped? Are you hearing? Let me ask you this, because you may have access to DEP or policymakers that we don't get to see very often. Um, is there anything coming out of DEP or the water management districts around more training, more consultant engagement, or are we just left to kind of crack the rule book and study?
Yeah, I I think it would be very important. There's actually something I think I learned from you, that there is a portion of the rule that considers new technologies or new criteria. So it encourages engineers to be creative. So
Mhm.
I would think it would be very important. In most of the engineers on this call probably understand what I'm talking about when you say you have an idea, and you might walk around your office and have just in a casual conversation, discuss it with another engineer and allow them to challenge your design assumptions, defend it, talk to your peers. And the best decisions always come from, discussion and coordination with others. Don't operate in a vacuum. Have those conversations and try to be creative. I think that's going to be one of the things that's important. Um, I think just recently you made a statement about a roadway project, and that's caused me to think, okay, if you're doing a roadway project, you don't have a lot of extra land to try to mitigate the impact of that project related to the new rules.
Mhm.
There, you have to be creative and find ways where you can have benefit. So that's going to be on every project. So I think having conversations both with peers and people who may have already found a solution that you may not be aware of, but share that information. Lessons learned is, I think, is going to be important. Groups like this and forums like this are going to be extremely important in just continuing to have those conversations. One of the things I think is beneficial for engineers being in the government process, whether it's voluntary boards, local government, whatever it is, that the narrative that you have in your head when anybody's talking, you're evaluating and critiquing it, share that with others, because, the narrative in your head would be helpful if other people could engage in that. I know I do that. I hear somebody talking and I might discount something that they say for a specific reason, but if you can then articulate that and challenge it, or maybe discuss it with a partner or a peer, you might have a better understanding. So I think communication, discussion, debate related to this rule is going to be extremely important in order to evolve it into something that's more appropriate. I said previously, we talked about treatment and attenuation. The attenuation part was the focus. The treatment was not a concern. If we can evolve this where it's, a better known process, that might be very beneficial to implementing it to its full effect.
Yeah, I agree with you very much. I think that something that I've talked with some of our committee folks over the last several months is how we can. There's a delicate balance here, so I'll kind of address this and address the competing issues here. I think there'd be a lot of benefit to sharing example designs of particularly creative designs that meet the new criteria. There are a lot of sites that are going to be very difficult to achieve the criteria. A question that just popped up in the chat about small sites with limited areas. Those are going to be really challenging. Folks that have successfully navigated those challenging sites and gotten designs through the review and approval process, those are going to be very valuable to other engineers and to other regulators, who I think many of which are going to struggle with the review and approval of something that they may have never seen before, and it's a new creative approach that they're, in their view, they're taking some risk too when they approve those projects.
Right.
So I think there's be a tremendous benefit to sharing a lot of examples of successful creative designs. However, I also appreciate that there's some proprietary, there's intellectual property involved. If you've got a creative solution and you got your project through, you may not necessarily want to educate all your competitors in the marketplace. So I know this is a bit of a tricky topic, but I think that there will be hopefully enough good examples and enough people that are willing to share them, where we can put some ideas out and use them as design examples, as little building blocks to getting solutions out there. I know I've talked to Borja Crane at DEP about adding more design examples on the DEP stormwater resources page. There's I think maybe only one design example there now. There needs to be a lot more. And I've encouraged him to do that. And I'll just put the call to action out for this group. If folks have got good example designs, DEP would like to have them and may even publish them. So if you got to be comfortable with them being published, but I think that'd be a good and valuable resource. Looking ahead of the rule itself, we've been talking about just a couple of things that maybe we can do to get ready. Are there any policy areas that you're thinking about or being talked about in the legislature around maybe training or innovation, or maybe even funding? I know funding is tough in a declining budget environment, but anything to help kind of catalyze some of the new technology or new design approaches that we're going to need to get to these new numbers. Anything being talked about around the halls?
I haven't heard anything yet, but I think the reality is that we knew for a year this was coming, and it didn't become a significant topic of discussion amongst the folks in the office until the clock was almost at midnight. Yeah. And then it suddenly became an issue where people were changing their focus from trying to get everything done under the old rule before the new rule was implemented to saying, okay, now I've got to start using the new rule, and how am I going to do that? So I think right now we don't have a very good sense of the issues that are being encountered that might require some type of discussion. But that being said, some of some parts of your question is, again, it wasn't necessary training and stuff like that, but I I think it's probably going to be an evolution. And as you know, you've been monitoring the legislative process. It's very seldom is anything a one and done. It's a continued reevaluation and modification, through the legislative process, and then DEP's rulemaking process is going to be also something that evolves over time. So I think as we understand or might encounter, I don't know that anybody would argue that there is a viable solution for every scenario. I'm sure there's something somebody's going to encounter that they just can't find a solution. So we're going to have the opportunity to evaluate and consider what do we do in those situations. So it's going to be a learning experience, a continued learning experience. And I don't just mean for engineers. I think it means for legislators and then for the agencies also.
I agree with that, and I appreciate that perspective. Do you think that that we'll see any appetite for tweaks this year, or do you think it's more of a wait and see? Let's see how implementation goes, and then start maybe a list of things that we might want to revisit if revisiting certain provisions of the rule becomes necessary.
I know some groups I think would like to see a consideration of some modification, like a delay or something like that. I don't know that there's an appetite for anything like that. I haven't heard anybody considering any bills. I would think if there were something like that, it would be very likely I would be involved in the conversations. And I haven't heard anything yet. There's a few of us who tend to be more involved in things like that. Toby Overdorf or Randy Maggard, who has been on the Water Management District Board. I think they would have a sense also, but I haven't heard anything from them. I think it's going to be more, again, I think an evaluation of the rule actually trying to be implemented over a 1-year period. So maybe next session, there might be some group that is extremely vocal and motivated to try to get some type of modification.
I'm going to wrap up this part of our discussion and start to open it up to questions. So folks in the listening, we've got 83 folks still on. If you got questions, be thinking about them. Get ready to raise your hand. I'll call on you in order, or feel free to put the questions in chat. But I'll transition with this kind of comment. I'm not sure there's a question in here yet. I'll see if I can frame it in the question at the end. I'll make my statement and then say, wouldn't you agree? But I think you got a lot of engineers that are focused on this subject of stormwater management, and many of us are very engaged on how the rule is being implemented. Very concerned about consistency of implementation and interpretation of some of these rule provisions. I know, speaking for myself, I've engaged multiple times with Water Management District leadership and DEP leadership to make sure that a certain provision of the rule is being interpreted, like we thought it was supposed to be interpreted when the rule was promulgated, and then B, that it's interpreted consistently between water management districts and DEP. And somebody who asked about that, Dan Bonas, your comment about consistency, I agree with you 100%. And when I call them, I'm not calling them as Jeff Littlejohn, PE, stormwater engineer. I'm calling them as, no, I represent the engineering industry, ACEC and FES. And I'm calling because it is a paramount concern of our industry that these rules be implemented consistently across the state. And I'll tell you that being able to call wearing that hat, DEP leadership is listening, water management district leadership are listening, and they do want consistency across the board. Uniformly. Every leader at every one of those agencies says, when I bring something up, they say, we appreciate you bringing it up. It is an opportunity for us to share on our next, they meet every other week. DEP and all the water management district stormwater program administrators meet every other week to talk about consistency. And so my call to action is, and I guess my report out to you, Rep. Connolly, is these groups right here, these committees right here, are engaged and will continue to be engaged on that. My call to action for our fellow committee members is, if you hear of inconsistencies, if you hear about a weird interpretation of something, elevate them. You don't have to bring it to me. I mean, I'll help you if you want to bring it to me, please do, but just elevate them. I think right now, when everybody is kind of on the steep part of the learning curve, I don't expect that a rank and file reviewer at a water management district would necessarily get all bent out of shape if you've got a disagreement on an interpretation of a provision that is brand new to that person and brand new to us, right? I think we should take these differences of interpretation or an implementation question as an opportunity to learn. And as long as we're all doing it respectfully, just say, hey, look, I have a different interpretation of that. This is a brand new provision. Let's get somebody else involved and let's have a broader discussion about this, because this is important to my project, and it's also important to my understanding of this brand new rule that we have. And I think if you approach a reviewer with that type of attitude, I think you'll find generally positive reaction to that, and maybe less defensiveness about kind of challenging their interpretation. I know that there's been a lot of questions out there about the grandfathering provisions. I know there's a lot of questions about how to interpret certain aspects of the new performance criteria, when they apply, how they apply. Those are, treat those as opportunities to help educate yourself, your peers, the people in your office, and between that approach and maybe sharing some good example designs, particularly when you're out on the kind of the cutting edge of innovation, I think with those two approaches, I think we may be able to weather the storm, and get more comfortable with this new rule faster. That's my soapbox, comma.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you agree, Rep. Connolly?
Yeah, well, absolutely. This isn't different than any other rule we've ever dealt with, where there are interpretations that maybe aren't consistent and they're challenged, and you get clarification. That this is going to be a continuation. I've not always been the easiest person to deal with, prior to running for office. Now I'm very easy to get along with now. But prior to running for office, if I got a comment, I would ask at times, I would say, is this a policy decision or is this something in the rule? And if it was policy, I was like, I'm not doing it. We need to be designing things based on the rules. So challenge, I wouldn't say challenge everything, but if there's inconsistencies, try to understand if it's a policy, if somebody's made a decision, there may be an opportunity to get clarification. So with your comment about you representing the industry, the reality is, as an elected official, I represent 183,000 people in my district, but I also feel like I represent all the engineers in the state of Florida. So I consider everybody that's an engineer a constituent, that if they have an issue, feel free to reach out to me. What I've found is when you control the checkbook, you tend to get calls returned from agencies and clarification. Constituent services is one of the priorities for elected officials. And if there's something that's problematic or inconsistent with interpretation, then there's an opportunity to for me as an elected official to kind of put a spotlight on it where we can get a clarification.
So just for the record, and on this recorded call, so you're telling me I can report to Borja. Don't make me get Representative Connerly on your
Yeah.
behind. All right, no, I won't do that. So starting to get some questions here. Thank you. Courtney Nelson has a question about an update on BMP Train software release. I suspect the representative isn't going to have an answer to this unless you've got some insight that I'm not aware of.
I
Mark,
do like
have you heard
trains. I do
anything?
like trains though.
Mark Thomason, you're my phone a friend. Have you heard anything new on BMP trains? I know we talked about this 2 webinars ago. Anything latest and greatest?
No update.
Okay.
Last I heard was they were expecting it before the end of the year.
Okay. All right. And then a 2-part question: what other software is being used with the new rule? That's a fantastic point to bring up. BMP Trains is a tool in the toolbox, but it's not the only tool that we can be using and should be using. I'll brag on Mark Thomason again. He put it's a spreadsheet model, but he put a model together for calculating, the assimilative capacity of wetlands to take up excess nutrients. And I think we put that little piece of software on the National Stormwater Trust website, so you could download it. So there are going to be other tools in the toolbox to kind of solve various problems, that come up in the new rule, whether it's wetland assimilative capacity or calculating nutrient loading from your site. If you want a deep dive on implementing BMP trains to calculate the nutrient reduction from multiple BMP types, if you go back to Mark's webinar from 2 times ago, webinar number 4, that was a great presentation on that. Who else has a question? Mark, you came off mute. Do you have something? No. Okay. All right. Let me try another one then to maybe prime the pump. So we've got these technical committees formed within ACEC and FES. I know you're aware of that. I think you may be a member of some of these committees. How can we help you? You mentioned that you're getting a lot of tasking. Is there anything that one or both of these committees can help formulate policy or technical support for policy to help you advance your initiatives in the legislature?
Absolutely. The having a active and informed group of experts providing feedback on what they're encountering in industry is extremely important. There are things that are outside our control that may cause needs for action at the state level that then become requirements that the engineers have to implement in their work and their designs. But if there's an identified problem that comes through a group that, they say this is an issue and the rule does not work, we need legislation to address this issue, that's always extremely helpful. That gives me ideas. I'm limited to the number of bills I can run. We at the House level right now, we have 7 bills max. The Senate can run unlimited number of bills, but they always have to have a companion partner. I typically have a companion House bill. So it kind of limits the legislative opportunities. I always try to look for things that are more meaningful, more impactful. And again, those are things that the areas of interest I have, the technical areas, tend to be things that other folks aren't going to understand or aren't going to be able to bring me ideas. So I would welcome ideas of opportunities to do things better, to do things more efficiently. from a group like engineers who are very attuned to providing solutions and solving problems.
No, I appreciate that, and I agree. I see we have Jen Johnson on the call today. Jen, I know you were with us a few webinars ago. I hate to put you on the spot, but I don't have any more questions in chat. And you just mentioned that you're working with UCF on updating BMP trains. When you were on, you also described some studies that you were doing about nutrient uptake from roadside ditches and maybe even the vegetation, roadside vegetation. Do you have anything to update or share with us? We'd love to see the results of any of that when you have it available.
So I'm in the conference room with Amanda, so it looked like Amanda speaking right now because we have the audio on her laptop.
Okay.
But sorry, so we don't have any updates yet. It is still an ongoing research project. And as we have results, we will share them on our website. And we have BMP trains is on our website if anyone is looking for that. And then, you know, we'll work on the conference circuit as that information comes available to try to get it in the hands of as many engineers as possible. And we're also looking at having some, you know, transportation specific training in this upcoming year. So we'll be going to each district office and try to get as many consultants as we can in the room to relay kind of how to meet the rule for transportation projects.
That's a great update. I really appreciate it. Do you mind if I ask you one follow-up? I'm very curious to see whether any of the science that comes out of the nutrient uptake studies that you're doing for roadside vegetation, whether any of that can be translated to nutrient uptake for, you know, grassy areas around parking lots at commercial developments or you know, any other types of designs that incorporate, you know, similar features, you know, vegetated swales and vegetated buffers off of impervious. Do you think any of that will be translatable, or is it just very transportation specific because of the, you know, the roads that are being studied?
It may be translatable as long as you're, you know, it all has to go into the soils, right? And so if like all of our research is based on our FDOT standards, so I know a lot of entities use the FDOT standards. So that may be, you know, it may be translatable as long as you're, you know, doing an apples to apples kind of comparison.
Okay.
And we
Well,
are working on we're working on those BMP fact sheets. And so those fact sheets will have what those assumptions are, and those will be published on our website as well.
Thank you so much for being a guest speaker today. I really appreciate it. We've got another, and we're looking forward to those updates. So thank you very much for doing that. We really do appreciate that. I got a question from Gary Ward. He's noticed, he looked up your bill filing so far and says only one has come out of bill drafting of your 7. Do you want to give a quick preview of the other bills you intend to file this year? Anything that you think this industry would be interested in?
Yeah. And for clarification, they have been very slow with bill drafting. But some of these may end up as being merged together. One of those might be the water management district bill that I ran last year, and it became a bit of a poker chip between the House and the Senate. I confirmed with the Senate sponsor that he's filing it, so I'm gonna file that again. And it mainly deals with how money is spent in Southwest Florida, you know, Everglades restoration and things like that. But as a part of that, I've been considering, and I mentioned previously to you, Jeff, that the group might have a similar opinion, but there's a lot of discussion that the information we use for a 100-year storm, when we do designs or any storm criteria, it might not be the most appropriate data. So trying to compel state agencies and local municipalities to require the the best available data. Right now, that's Atlas 14, that type of data. So trying to figure out a way to craft language that essentially is going to redefine what a 100-year storm is, based on more modern data than what we've been using. I'm working on a bill that will essentially phase out aqueous film forming foam, which is, again, it's a PFAS chemical, and it's the primary source of environmental contamination in the state of Florida. Focusing on the product, and this is something that impacts the firefighters, their lives. They have higher incidences of cancer, and the presumption is it's tied to continued exposure to the AFFF. That might be that's going to be something that I'm working on, and again, it's focusing on phasing it out, but it'll have a positive environmental benefit. And then as a part of that, again, it's a bill that might be melded into the banning of PFAS, but testing of biosolids from waste treatment facilities to get an understanding of the baseline concentration of the PFAS chemicals. So that's essentially 4 bills that I hope to make into 2 bills. Also working on a bill that's reevaluating the state requirements for educational facilities. Those haven't been updated in 12 years. One of the local school board members asked if I would be willing to champion the updating of those. So that'll have an impact on anybody who may be doing educational type of projects. Again, that's a fairly complicated one, and I haven't gotten that out of the drafting yet. And then there was one that a suggestion from, and this is a very good example, a suggestion from a group at ACEC related to contracting. There's a section of the contracting language that is different depending on if it's public or private entities, and it deals with indemnification. So, working to get that resolved, have it consistent between the two entities. And one of them, I've got a couple suggested tweaks to statute or suggestions related to housing affordability that I just got yesterday from a group. Actually, it was a group from UF. They have an interest in housing. They're pretty active. And then one of the other things that is somewhat related to our conversation today is septic systems, and the fact that they don't consider phosphorus or total phosphorus in the design of the systems, that it's ignored, and trying to maybe look at adding that as a criteria for the on-site waste design criteria. That kind of, the reality is we're developing these B maps, and we're gonna have a history of performance, meaning, over a period of time, they're going to continue to do testing and understand if the rules that we're implementing today through stormwater are going to have a benefit. And I think if we can maybe take the same approach with the on-site waste system, septic systems, I think there's more of an impact than we acknowledge, just because it's not part of the design. It's being tested and identified, but we're not addressing it in the in the systems right now. So I think that would probably be helpful. It'd give us I think a better picture of the overall environment if that were something that was part of a design component. And then the other thing, I had a conversation with DEP today about it. I think it needs to be a performance-based type of system that requires continual demonstration, because I'm certain that the rules require, like for nitrogen, when you do a design, it would say if properly maintained, and once it once it becomes the responsibility of a homeowner, that's very unlikely that it's properly maintained. So I think if we can continue to have that as maybe evaluate that and nitrogen removal as performance-based designs, I think we might see some benefit over a period of time with regard to the B maps with those two constituents. Those are a few things I got.
Yeah, a few.
know,
I
in the
think I've
work.
got 8 or 9 or 10. You definitely have to squeeze them down to meet all your bill slots. Hopefully that was responsive to your question. We just have a minute left. Brandon, I see you just threw a new question into the rule, and now I've got Laura with her hand raised. So I do know I need to call on Laura since I report to her. She's my boss. So go ahead, Laura.
Okay, first of all, that's hilarious. But thank you very, very much. I wanted to say thank you to Representative Connerly for your time today as our guest speaker, and then all the different ways that you are engaged with our organizations on behalf of engineers and the industry at large. And thank you to all of our guest speakers who have participated in this series over the last several months, but most importantly, to Jeff, who I have now learned I'm his boss. Thank you for all of your hard work in arranging all of these really detailed subject matter focused conversations. It has truly been a great member benefit and has also engaged some of the different people in the community who may not currently be members of our organizations, but who are considering that. And so I would just, again, say thank you to all of you and to our members who have signed on, to those who are not members. If you are interested in accessing any of the recorded content, as Jeff said, it is available on our websites, but only as a member benefit. And just look under our resources tabs on either the ACEC Florida or FES websites to access that information after you've logged in to your membership profile. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura, very much. And it is 1 o'clock, so I want to wrap this up with a thank you to everybody who joined us today. And Rep. Connolly, we really do appreciate your time, sir. Thanks so much for your perspective and for spending some time with us today.
Thank you. And if I can help anyway, please just let me know.
We appreciate it, sir. Thanks, everybody. Y'all enjoy the rest of your day. Appreciate you
Thank
being
you.
here.